Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This may be a relatively quick meeting because it sounds like Ms. Vanyo is not able to join us until about 1. Dr. Peterson is unavailable today. I'm not sure everyone got that email. And Judge Garrett is also unavailable today. I think we had 2 broad topics for today, and that was just the risk assessment and how we're proceeding with pretrial services. So I'm not sure we have much to update with the risk assessment tool. Stephen, do you have anything on that?
I do not have anything on that. I thought the other topic might be continuing the conversation on the willful flight pilot project with, I think it was the Pretrial Justice Institute that we talked about last time, but I don't know if that's teed up to go either.
Yeah, I planned on talking about that a little bit, and I would open up the conversation, give a little bit of update from the court's side on that.
Yeah, great.
As far as the risk assessment, I really don't know if I have much to add. I don't know if anyone has any input here. We got an email from Andrew. He had been busy with other projects, I think, in the last month, and so we don't have any new data to look at. All I can say is, as of now, it is still being used for every individual booked in and having a first appearance in the jail. But anything from pretrial services, Alan, on that?
No, nothing to update on the actual risk assessment tool itself. I will say in the last week or two, I've been with the help of Andrea, who works as the pretrial manager in Pierce County. She's been generous enough to video conference with me and email me a lot, just because I'm learning more about CE. Actually, there's a lot of stats and things that I was never really instructed on, and she's helping me pull some stats out of it. So what I'm trying to do over the last 3 years, because we can't really use much in 2019, because that's kind of when we launched, I'm trying to get a list of how people have scored since 2019 all the way to present, and seeing how many highs, mediums, and lows. And it's taken a little bit more than just generating a report, because I'm going to go through then, I mean, almost 3,700 cases. I'm going to go through and make sure there's no doubles. So let's say if, such and such gets booked in and it's booked in on 4 different charges, it'll generate his score, his high, medium, or low, 4 times. And that kind of skews the results a little bit, because the idea is to have one score for the person, not one score per charge, if that makes sense. So I'm spending time going through this report, this one particular report, just eliminating all those double, triple, quadruple scores to hopefully get a more clear picture. And what we do with that information, I'm not sure, but I think it will be useful going on to see how people are falling on these levels, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and you're just looking at the individuals that actually had the risk assessment applied. I think we did ask Dr. Peterson to look retroactively at those that may not have had the risk assessment. Is that right, Alan?
Correct. Yeah, I'm only pulling information from CE, meaning that we would have had to have ran them. So there will be kind of a blackout period too. I can't remember the exact dates, but I believe it was sometime in 2021 that we didn't use the PSA. It was kind of suspended for a few months during COVID. So we just got to take that into a consideration when everything's presented.
Okay. Any questions for Alan on that, or any thoughts or concerns about the PSA before we move on to pretrial services?
Yeah, Judge Freeman, I think maybe I'll take advantage of Dr. Peterson's absence here. It seems that we have a lot of raw data, and we're at this analytical step. So I'm not sure I understood any more than half of what Alan was referring to, but I'm encouraged that you've taken the initiative to start slicing and dicing some of that stuff. I'm going to acknowledge that Dr. Peterson's been really valuable to this, but he's also got a full-time job with other demands and other priorities. And I'm just wondering whether our time needs are fitting with his time availability and whether we should supplement his professional assistance with additional resources, maybe somebody at Western who has some data capabilities as well. I don't know anything specific to suggest, but I'm just raising the question whether we want to move faster on this analytical piece of things than Dr. Peterson alone is able to do with us.
Stephen, I don't know that somebody outside of AOC would have access to the information that they need.
Right. I think that's a great point, Dave. I don't either.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Judge. I will say, I would also like to pull more data as well, Stephen. It would almost be like a learning curve for me to have Dr. Peterson walk me through how he gathered that data for me to maybe mimic that. And I don't know if that's really within my my scope anyways, but I'll pull what I can do. And if you have any ideas, or if you would like to guide my I guess what information you'd like to pull out, I'm more than willing to dive into CE and see how I can find that information. I just I guess some guidance, not guidance per se, but just some ideas on what information would be valuable to us, and I'll try and find that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I even know enough to offer that sort of guidance, Alan, but I'll give that some thought. When you say CE, can you clarify what that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. CE is our tracking software. It's what we enter every defendant in at first appearance, or I should say when we open a case on them, even if they're referred from out of custody court, we'll enter them in CE Ottoman software. And that's what does all our tracking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that will be useful. I do have concern because something that I brought up quite a bit over the last year is that I really would like to see the people that have either been booked and released or not been booked, that may have been booked prior to 2020, and compare those numbers and how they would have scored on our PSA, because we based our PSA, I think, on Yakima. Yakima had a bit of a different dynamic even at the time with larger facility and different booking procedures. And I really want to be able to look kind of globally at who we're targeting and what these outcomes are, and whether we need to shift our focus a little bit. And I just don't know if we can do that without AOC's input. Well, if there's nothing else on the PSA, we can move on to pretrial. I can update the group on just a few aspects that the court is looking at. First, as I reported last time, we did put the supervisor position out. It's been a slow process because we've got folks out, so we still are interviewing people. And we've got one judge that's unavailable for the next couple of weeks. So that picks back up again, I think, in a week and a half, and we'll resume interviews. So that has been a bit slow, but it is in progress. I think at our next, Alan can correct me if I'm wrong here. Alan had some good ideas when it came to social media and our pretrial services. I think the court wanted to hear that directly with Alan, so we could get kind of an explanation of what that would look like. And I think Alan's been working with Judge Grockmal on that. And Alan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're trying to get you in at our next judges meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was unavailable last week, but I am scheduled to be there on the 23rd in the morning to talk about it.
Perfect. So I think that might be kind of one minor shift that we're making, depending on Alan's report there and how we can better effectuate. One thing that I really like about that idea is just contacts. I routinely hear in court that the only way defense attorneys are able to contact their clients or through Facebook Messenger. I mean, it's just I hear that at least once a week. And so I think having pretrial services with an account and the ability to contact people through that method might assist in reminders and things like that. So we're going to talk about that. I did bring up our conversation last meeting with Megan Guevara to the judges meeting last week. I talked to Megan ahead of time and kind of gave her a heads up that I'm going to be formulating some written questions for her to pass on. There were definitely a lot of questions and concerns from the bench on this. I would say a lot of it maybe mimicked what I was saying as far as implementation, not so much the data collection, but there were also a lot of data collection concerns about how that would actually look. We already have very lengthy calendars, so how are we going to add that to the, if it is going to be done, is it going to be done at the time of the failure to appear? Or is it going to be done at the time of the warrant quash? If it's done at the time of the warrant quash, oftentimes we see these as agreed orders. So how are we going to make that inquiry if the parties are handing up an agreed order quashing the bench warrant? So how that data would be collected, and then the very obvious concerns with how would you ever implement that on a local level when our reliance is on state systems and state data. So I'm trying to formulate the questions that I got from my colleagues into a somewhat manageable email to Megan and see what she can tell us about that. I still think that there might be an avenue here where we could be a pilot when it came to the data collection. And I'm certainly have an open mind when it comes to implementation. I just think there's likely a very significant challenge here with implementation. So I know a lot of people had interest in that last week, so I want to open up that for discussion before we talk about any other pretrial issues.
Judge Freeman, do you consider the posing of those questions once you formulate them and Megan's response as sort of internal to the judicial officer communication, or how much can you share with this group?
I plan on sharing all of that once I get that information. It's a process because I want this work group to be able to give a recommendation, but I also want my colleagues to be fully informed. And that's why I didn't want to waste Megan's time with multiple levels of going back and forth. So yes, I will be presenting it to the group. Her responses, whether we are a viable pilot site, and then I would bring that back as well as the recommendation from the committee to the judges. I think the overall feeling that I got from them was much like my own, that maybe the initial willful flight didn't best describe what they were really looking at, and that was whether there was a reason for the FTA or not. I think when we think of willful flight, it's a little bit different, fleeing the jurisdiction, something of that nature. So I don't think there's a disagreement that this could be very valuable as a resource and a distinction between the two. The problem becomes, how would you ever implement that on a local level when you're relying on state FTA history on every defendant? Even within this jurisdiction, would you be able to get municipal court records to reflect that? And then the data collection itself, which I still think we might be able to figure out some workarounds there, but there is questions. There are questions. Any other questions or concerns about this topic?
I have one.
Yeah.
Quick question, Your Honor. When we're trying to gather that information about willful flight, and maybe you already answered this, and I didn't hear it right. Are we trying to determine like just a general FTA? Because I know I've looked at court documents before, and they've just said Court notes defendant's failure to appear, continued to, I think then I'll say like continue to next hearing. So are we trying to like exclude those types of FTAs and only going with if a warrant was issued?
It's more precise than that, because I think the target is whether the individual willfully did not show up. So if there was some other reason such as medical, employment, transportation that would have limited their ability to appear, we want to target those as not being, I'm going to call it a willful FTA rather than a willful flight, because I think the flight term scares off some folks on this, but which I think is useful. But how do you collect that data? I mean, typically in court, when there's an FTA, we may get an offer from a defense attorney that, hey, my client had their car break down or something like that. And oftentimes those types of cases get continued a week and there wouldn't be an FTA anyway. So more often than not, it's that there is no information at the time a warrant is issued. And then how do we collect the data when it comes back? Is it based on the timeline from when it was issued to when it was quashed? Because that's something that we could probably easily track. Did they come back in the next week and quash it versus 6 months on warrant status? Or are we really looking at the precise reasons why they failed to appear? And those are going to be much more difficult to track.
Judge Freeman, I appreciate the practical concerns about this, especially across jurisdictions. Are there regular communications, or at least avenues for communications between Superior Court, District Court, and the various municipal courts? Is it possible to talk about reaching a consensus across jurisdictions on this? And at what point would you think that is proper? And given the difficulty data-wise in trying to pull out information that it doesn't exist right now, is there value even if we could only eliminate part of the scored FTAs, which would in many cases affect the ultimate scores as well? So could there be a benefit even from partial implementation of this? I guess that's a two-for question.
Possibly, but then you are treating different defendants in different ways as far as how you're looking at FTA scores, which is a little concerning to me. Because if you have an out-of-county defendant, then their scores are going to score differently. As a practical matter, and I would defer to Dave Reynolds on this, but I also think there is going to be a hurdle with how both JABS and Odyssey, so our state systems. I don't know with JABS, but and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you would actually have to backtrack the FTA in order to make it if we're calling it not willful, then there would be no substitution other than FTA in the JAB system right now. You would have to back that out.
I believe that's correct, Your Honor.
So that
I think my assumption is that there may be some uncurable historical FTAs, and we'll just have to let those sit. And I understand that may result in some I don't want to say inequities, but different treatment for where those FTAs were recorded. But is that a bearable price for the information we might find out from the pilot of that?
Yeah, and I still have some hope that we actually could, just as a information gathering. I'm still not sure practically you could actually apply it, but I agree with you on information gathering and why some of the state systems maybe should be changed for this reason. But what I'm saying is, let's not even talk about the historical, because we already deal with that a little bit to cases that have been vacated by Blake and maybe cases that would have been affected by, but I'm talking about current cases. If you have somebody that FTAs, that will be logged as an FTA in JABS. Odyssey will reflect the bench warrant. Now you could put a note in Odyssey later on when they quash as to the reason, but when the criminal history is pulled up in JABS, unless that FTA from, let's say, a month ago is then backed out because the person was hospitalized or something of that nature, it's still going to show an FTA, and it'll be very difficult to actually apply that. And again, I'm not an expert on JABS, but that does seem like a complication we're going to run into with that state system.
And you haven't had any chance to dialogue with Megan about that. That's what you're trying to formulate a question around. Is that right?
That's one of many that came up in the meeting.
Yeah.
But that was the one that I was the most concerned with, was implementation. It wasn't so much data gathering, because again, I think I sent all the materials to my colleagues ahead of time. They had a chance to look at it. I think once they got beyond the willful flight aspect that I did initially, there was interest here as far as the data collection and the reasons behind it. It's just, we need to have answers as to how we could both implement this locally and how we could be a useful resource for this project. I certainly don't want to waste their time either if doing it on this scale is not going to be worthwhile. What, in my mind, something like a tribal jurisdiction or something like that would be a much more useful place to actually implement this, because then you could get real results of a closed system, but versus one jurisdiction in a very large system of data. But again, Megan might have answers for those. It's just a matter of getting back to her. I kind of gave her a very brief but broad heads up of what was coming last week. So hopefully I will have some answers at our next meeting.
Well, thank you for all this legwork on this.
Of course. Any other questions about that? I guess maybe one more thing. I just saw Carol up there. So the thing that popped to mind is just knowing that every jurisdiction in this county does, issue bench warrants a little bit differently too, for FTAs. That's another factor to consider. So yes, we do have communication to answer your earlier question, Stephen. But I can't say that with certainty that we'd all be on the same page as to how bench warrants are issued and how the data was collected. So. All right, I'm trying to think if we have any other pretrial issues. Anyone else have any issues on pretrial that they want to bring up? Not hearing anything. This is going to be a relatively short meeting. Anything else? Any topics not on the agenda that anyone wants to bring up? Any hands raised? So with that, I'll ask if there's anyone in the public viewing that has any questions or concerns.
Yeah, so it looks like there is one attendee with their hand raised.
Okay.
Jason, do you want to go ahead and speak?
Hi, yes, Jason DeForest, local business owner. How are you folks?
Good. Welcome, Jason.
Good, thanks. Just to confirm, we're trying to collect information on people that don't want to show up and we want to know why, correct?
Yes, generally.
right,
If you're talking about the last topic, yes.
Yes, Your Honor, I apologize. If we're trying to do that, why aren't we going to these people anonymously with like a third-party survey? People are very honest, especially inmates. Once they're in there, I've spent time in that jail with those inmates, and they will tell you very much exactly what happened. And at least it's an opinion, right? So you get one side of the story, now you've got the other, and now you can kind of find the truth in the middle. But if you put out an anonymous survey to these people, maybe 6 months down the road and said, hey, look, this is a third-party company trying to find out anonymously why you didn't show up to court, you may find some very honest answers.
Thank you, Jason. Good idea, and I will inquire with the pretrial services group that we're in contact with about that.
Thank you.
And Jenna, any other hands raised?
Nope, that is it.
Okay, I know we cut this short today, but I think with all the absences, it's probably about as much as we can accomplish for today. And I think with our next meeting, we'll take the topic back up, hopefully have more information on pretrial services as far as the data collection goes from Megan. I do really want to remind everyone that as far as the court's focus right now, of course, we want to validate the risk assessment tool, but we would really like input from this group when it comes to how we envision pretrial services going forward and what we're offering and how we're offering it. And that is the topic that the judges are talking about, and it's what will assist us the most right now in how we go forward with pretrial services. So I do really want to get this group focused on that as well, at least jointly with the risk assessment, because that is, you know, Alan's been short-staffed for a very long time, and we've been on hold a bit, and we want to see this program develop. And I think this group is probably our best resource to do that. All right, thanks, everybody.
Your
Carol,
Honor.
Yeah.
Carol, go ahead and speak.
Yep.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Judge Freeman. Just a question around the scope of the request for input around the pretrial services unit. Is that within the goal of minimizing incarceration and using the risk assessment tool, or does that include broader possibilities for the pretrial services unit? Again, I'm speaking as victim advocate in domestic violence cases where other types of monitoring and supervision sometimes come up for other kinds of risk mitigation purposes, which I'm never entirely sure how to merge those concerns with the topics of this work group.
And I can only speak for myself, and I know there's disagreement about this issue, Carol, but the way I see this is we are always under the court rule looking for the least restrictive alternative. And so oftentimes if certain safety concerns can be addressed in other ways than bail, which would include some sort of monitoring, then obviously to me that falls under a goal for incarceration reduction, because it is choosing the lesser alternative. So in my mind, yes, that does include a broader topic of what other monitoring or services are out there. And Stephen, I don't know if you share that view, but I know that the judges are, you know, all I can say is we're looking at the least restrictive alternatives, and we'd like to consider any of them that could be available to us in pretrial.
I do share that view, yeah.
Okay. Did that bring up any other questions or concerns? All right. Thanks, everybody. I think our next meeting in September, I don't have my calendar in front of me. Jill, do you have that?
September 1st.
September 1st. Thank you. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.